This story is true, and for the safety of everyone involved, I'll change their names. But I'll stick as close as possible to what really happened. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments if you would have the guts to do this. Loneliness has a sneaky way of creeping into your life, quiet as the snow falling on those cold Chicago nights. Emily never thought her marriage to Michael would become an emotional wasteland. But his long hours at the office, the emails he answered in bed, the weekends swallowed up by work, it all added up to an absence that went beyond the physical. Desire turned into routine, touch became rare, and their time together boiled down to silent dinners where only the silverware made any noise. The warmth between them faded, and she felt the cold take over, from the inside out. That's why Michael started paying his nephew Nathan to help Emily with small chores around the house, changing a light bulb, fixing a door, carrying heavy boxes. At first, it was just a favor, a practical arrangement to cover for Michael's lack of time. But as the days went by, his presence started to fill more than just the empty spaces left by her husband. The way Nathan offered to help, the casual way his eyes wandered over her body, the jokes laced with attention that shouldn't be there, it all started to awaken something Emily was trying to ignore. She realized Nathan's attention was different. He wasn't just there to tighten screws or fix what was broken. He saw Emily. When he talked to her, his gaze held hers with a disturbing magnetism. Every time he came over, the house seemed less quiet, less cold. His laughter filled the room in a way her own husband hadn't in years, and without realizing it, Emily began to eagerly await the days he would show up. The emptiness left by Michael wasn't just an absence anymore. It was an invitation, a space ready to be filled by something new, something forbidden. What started as just a game of glances began to gain an intensity that Emily didn't know if she wanted to control. Nathan became more than just a helper at Emily's house. Always available, always helpful, he showed up at the right moments, ready to fix something, whether it was a household problem or the loneliness that settled in her chest. At first, it was just nice to have him around, someone to talk to while he changed a shower head or carried some boxes. But over time, the conversations stopped being just casual. He paid attention, asked questions, remembered details that Michael never seemed to notice, and that was dangerously addicting. The conversations between them started to deepen, as if they were partners in an unspoken secret. Nathan talked about his ambitions, about how he felt lost sometimes, about wanting to be more than what people expected of him. Emily listened, fascinated, feeling a warmth rise through her body each time he opened up to her. And without realizing it, she started to share too about how she felt forgotten, about how the years made her feel invisible within her own marriage. The exchange of secrets created an invisible bond, but one that grew stronger every day. And then came the small gestures, the way Nathan held her hand to take a screwdriver, lingering a second longer than necessary. The accidental touch when they bumped into each other in the kitchen, the easy laughter, the closeness that, with each passing day, became less innocent. Emily noticed his gaze on her exposed skin, felt the weight of the tension in the air. It was a subtle game, but loaded with possibilities, and she no longer knew if she wanted to run away or surrender. Michael was still absent, and Nathan increasingly present. The space between right and wrong diminished with each passing day. Each conversation, each look held a little beyond the limit. The desire didn't need to be spoken aloud. It pulsed, vibrated between them like static electricity, about to turn into a spark. Their encounters started to take on a new rhythm, an anticipation that Emily didn't dare admit even to herself. Before Nathan arrived, she would catch herself choosing clothes more carefully, fixing her hair in front of the mirror, spraying a light perfume on her exposed skin. It wasn't for him, she told herself. It was for her. But the shiver that ran down her spine when she heard the sound of his truck parking outside told a different story. Nathan noticed. He always noticed. His eyes ran over her body in a way that made her feel desired again, and the compliments came without hesitation. Michael is a very lucky man, you know. I don't think he has any idea what an amazing woman he has at home. His voice was husky, laden with something Emily pretended not to notice. She laughed, looked away, but felt the heat rise in her chest and face. Because the truth is, unlike Michael, Nathan saw and made a point of reminding her of it, whenever he could. The conversations became more intimate, more dangerous. Emily talked about how she felt invisible, and Nathan didn't hide his indignation. "If I had a woman like you, I would never let you feel that way." The tone was sincere, but loaded with a subtext that made the air between them thick. Desire pulsed, vibrated in the tight space between a compliment and a lingering look, between an accidental touch and a charged silence. She knew she was playing with fire. But how could she resist? How could she ignore the shiver that ran through her skin when Nathan lightly touched her arm, as if testing the limits? How could she say no to the man who made a point of seeing her in a way her own husband hadn't in years? The line between right and wrong became increasingly blurred, and Emily no longer knew if she wanted to see it. The tension in the air was palpable, and she felt it was going further than she had imagined. Her clothes, once plain, now seemed designed to awaken something she could no longer control. The tight dress outlined her curves in a subtle but irresistible way, and the high heels, which she used to wear to feel powerful, now seemed to be part of the game. Every step she took towards the kitchen made Nathan watch her more intensely. It was impossible to ignore the desire that grew between them. "How about some wine, to relax a little?" she suggested, her gaze fixed on his. Nathan hesitated for a second, like he wanted to back out. But something in the way she looked at him, like she was challenging him without words, made him accept. Emily knew what she was doing. Michael had texted saying he was having dinner out with business partners, and this was the opportunity she didn't want to miss. As the wine glasses filled up and the smooth wine flowed, the conversation became more relaxed, more charged with a subtle electricity you could almost touch. Nathan looked at her with a playful smile, but his eyes revealed what he was feeling, what he wanted. Emily could feel the heat growing between them with every sip. She knew what was happening, knew she was no longer pretending that what they were sharing was just friendship. And before she knew it, the wine slipped from her hands, spilling onto her silk dress. "Oh no!" Emily cried, trying to dab at the stain, but the fabric was completely soaked. The wine trickled down her skin, and without a second thought, she took off her dress, the sound of the zipper echoing in the quiet room. The sight of Emily now in just her underwear made the air between them electric. "I don't want it to stain," she said in a voice that sounded almost like an apology. But Nathan's eyes were fixed on her, and nothing else seemed to matter. The clothes fell to the floor like a broken barrier, and she felt the courage of the situation become uncontrollable. The desire was no longer a whispered secret between stolen glances. Now it manifested explosively, without disguise. After Emily took off her dress, the distance between them vanished as if it had never existed. Nathan couldn't fool himself anymore, and neither could she. The air was thick with desire, and when their eyes met again, the attraction was undeniable. It was at this moment that Emily felt the urge to act. She approached slowly, her steps slow, calculated, as if she wanted to savor every second of that tension before giving in completely. When she finally reached him, there were no words, only a subtle touch of Nathan's hands, a way of paving the way for what they both knew was the next step. She gently pulled him by the collar of his shirt, their lips almost touching. "Emily, I can't keep resisting." His response was immediate. Nathan pulled her close with an urgency that shattered any lingering doubt. Their lips met forcefully, and the kiss, so longed for, exploded like a spark igniting dry straw. Their bodies fit together without hesitation, as if they were made for this. His hands, now bolder, explored her skin, tracing her contours with growing reverence. Each movement, each touch was a promise of more, and the feeling of something forbidden made the experience even more intense. Emily's moans mingled with Nathan's sighs, and in surrender they became one. The world outside that room disappeared, and the only thing that existed was the warmth between them, the unquenchable thirst that consumed any sense of right or wrong. This was a secret, and she knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. But in that moment, guilt seemed too far away, and desire spoke louder. Emily and Nathan were meeting more and more often, and the line between desire and reality was blurring. It didn't matter where they were anymore, in the living room, in the bedroom, in the garden. The chemistry between them was obvious, and Nathan seemed to have a special way of making her feel incredible, in a way that Michael, even with all his love, never could. Every touch from Nathan, every kiss, every intimate gesture, made Emily completely lose herself, as if she were floating in a new reality, where nothing else mattered. But over time, Michael began to notice changes. He watched her more closely and asked her often if everything was all right, as if the unease in the air was something he couldn't ignore. Emily tried to hide it, forcing a smile and saying that everything was fine, but the tension between her and Nathan was becoming harder to hide. Small details, furtive glances, spontaneous gestures that weren't there before were replacing normalcy. Michael, with his sensitivity, wasn't the same anymore. He felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know exactly what it was. So, on a typical day, Michael decided to come home early from his meeting with the businessmen. The traffic was light, which made him arrive earlier than expected. Emily was at home, and Nathan once again was there, so close to her, and the flames of desire between them were burning once more. When Michael entered the house, the tension was immediate. He heard muffled sounds coming from the bedroom, and as he got closer, he saw Emily almost fall apart when she realized he was there, earlier than she expected. Nathan, in a quick move, hid on the bedroom balcony, his heart pounding, while Emily tried to play it cool, grabbing the first thing she could find to cover herself up. Michael stood there, watching, and then he saw his wife, only in her underwear, and with an expression she couldn't hide. Surprise washed over him, and his eyes scanned every detail, every movement. Emily was clearly uncomfortable. She went towards him, saying she didn't know he'd be back so soon. And to cover up, she started kissing Michael, and put her hands on his chest. Michael, trying to resist so he could analyze what was really going on, was taken by surprise by Emily's move as she knelt down and took his penis in her mouth. At that point, he couldn't resist anymore, and Emily dragged him into the bathroom so Nathan could escape. After Nathan left, Emily was still tense. Her body was still burning with the intensity of what had just happened. Michael, who wasn't totally convinced, seemed to be processing the situation silently. Michael knew something was wrong, but he felt unable to confront her directly. The silence between them was deep, but their unspoken words weighed more than any speech. Emily didn't dare speak about Nathan, and Michael, his mind still full of doubts and a pain he didn't know how to process, also stayed silent. The shower was over, but the weight of the situation continued to hang in the air.
Michael, lost in his own thoughts, began to observe more closely. Emily's behavior, the small changes in her gestures, and the way she reacted to moments of intimacy were pushing them further apart each day. He wasn't ready to accept it yet, but he knew something was happening, something he couldn't ignore. Emily and Nathan's encounters continued, becoming more frequent, and Michael became more observant. Nathan's messages, the furtive glances, the subtle touches, everything was becoming a routine for them. Yet Michael still didn't know exactly what was going on. He started to realize there was no way to hide the truth anymore, and even without confronting Emily directly, the warning signs were clear in his mind with every move she made. The risk was more imminent than ever, and the distance between them was becoming a wall too high to climb. So, Michael devised a plan. That Friday, he decided to take control of the situation. He felt that if he didn't do something, things between him and Emily would continue to crumble, and the pain of suspicion was eating him alive. Determined, he sent Emily a message, saying he had a business dinner and would be home late. He knew that as soon as she saw the message, her mind would immediately turn to the one she was betraying him with. And it didn't take long for Emily to message him back, just as Michael had expected. That instant exchange of messages was more than just a sign of complicity. It was the confirmation of what he had feared all along. With his mind set on his plan, Michael hid inside a car he had borrowed from a friend, parked in front of his house. He wanted to be there, watching, waiting to see who would actually enter his home. Minutes passed until, finally, Nathan appeared. At first, Michael hesitated. He hadn't suspected Nathan. After all, he was Emily's nephew. He thought the guy might be there for some other reason, maybe even something related to Michael's own work, something that could interfere with the meeting he had scheduled for the night. Doubt clouded his mind, but deep down, his instincts told him something was wrong. Michael stayed in the car for a few more minutes, anxiety gripping him as he wondered whether he should confront Emily right then or wait a little longer. The decision was tough, but the thought of acting without knowing everything made him feel powerless. In the end, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and walked silently to the front door. As soon as he entered, he felt a heavy tension in the air, growing stronger with every step he took inside the house. The silence seemed to echo in every room, but as he walked further, something made his heart race. Clothing scattered across the hallway. The first piece of clothing was a man's shirt thrown on the stairs, followed by a pair of pants left on the couch. Michael didn't need more clues to understand what was happening. Every piece of fabric left behind by Emily and Nathan was a clear sign of what was unfolding inside. The silence was even heavier now, and he followed the trail to the bedroom. When he entered, his worst fear was confirmed. There they were, in his bed, completely lost in each other, unaware that he was standing there, watching. Emily was completely naked on all fours, and behind her, her nephew Nathan was thrusting hard. For a moment, Michael just stood there, speechless, staring at the scene. Nathan was the first to notice, stopping immediately and covering himself. As soon as he did, Michael, devastated, turned his back. Emily, wrapped in a bedsheet, ran after him, saying it wasn't what he thought. Michael just smiled and walked away without saying a word. Emily spent the entire weekend sending messages trying to explain herself, but Michael never replied. By Monday, his lawyer had contacted her to proceed with their divorce. Emily was devastated, but she knew the mistake she had made. If you enjoy this kind of story, leave a comment to support the channel, subscribe, and drop a like. And don't forget to check out our last video about the well-endowed stepfather.